The scorching sun beat down on the dusty street of Silver Creek as Josephine Jones held back tears, her trembling hands clutching the ultimatum that would change her life forever. You have until sundown tomorrow to accept Bartholomew Pierce's proposal, or your father's debts become the town's business, the banker had whispered, his voice like venom as he left her standing alone outside the general store. It was 1885 in the Arizona Territory, and a woman with no money and a father who gambled away their ranch had precious few options. Josephine Josie, to those who knew her, was 22, and until yesterday had believed she might forge her own path despite the constraints of frontier life. Now she watched that dream dissolving like morning mist under the harsh western sun. Pierce was twice her age, a cattle baron with 3 dead wives and a reputation that made most men cross the street when they saw him coming. His proposal wasn't about love, it was about power and possession. He wanted the Jones land that bordered his ranch, and he wanted Josie as his latest trophy. She walked slowly toward the saloon where her father had taken up residence since their troubles began, her blue calico dress billowing slightly in the hot breeze. The wooden boardwalk creaked beneath her boots, each step feeling heavier than the last. "Careful there, Miss Jones." A deep voice called out just as she nearly collided with a man exiting the telegraph office. Josie looked up, startled from her thoughts. Ethan O'Malley stood before her, his tall frame blocking the sun, casting his face in shadow beneath the wide brim of his worn leather hat. His reputation preceded him, a skilled rancher who'd arrived in Silver Creek 6 months ago, buying the old Henderson place and keeping mostly to himself. "Mr. O'Malley," she acknowledged with a nod, attempting to step around him. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the whole territory on your shoulders," he said, his green eyes studying her face with unexpected gentleness. Something about his direct gaze made her pause. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was the way he looked at her, not through her like most men did, but truly at her. "I suppose I am," she admitted. "Excuse me." "If there's anything I can do to help," he began, but she was already moving past him, unable to bear kindness when her future seemed so bleak. What Josie didn't know then was that Ethan O'Malley had his own reasons for watching her walk away, with concern etched across his sun-weathered face. Reasons that would soon collide with her predicament in ways neither could imagine. The Silver Dollar Saloon smelled of whiskey, sweat, and desperation. Josie spotted her father at his usual table in the corner, cards in one hand, a glass in the other. Thomas Jones had once been the most respected rancher in 3 counties. Now he was just another broken man seeking refuge in gambling and drink. "Pa," she said quietly as she approached his table. The other players, a collection of ranch hands and drifters, exchanged uncomfortable glances before gathering their chips and dispersing. "Josie girl," Thomas slurred, attempting to straighten in his chair. "You shouldn't be in here." "Mr. Pierce's man came to see me today," she said, sitting down across from him. "He says you've mortgaged the ranch to Pierce. Is that true?" Thomas Jones looked down at his empty glass, shame crossing his weathered face. "I had a run of bad luck. Bad luck." Josie fought to keep her voice steady. "You've gambled away our home, and now Pierce is demanding I marry him to settle your debts." "He what?" For a moment, her father seemed to sober. "I never agreed to that. It doesn't matter what you agreed to. He holds the papers on our land, and he's made his terms clear." She leaned forward. "Pa, I need you to fix this." Thomas Jones's shoulders slumped. "I can't, Josie, I'm sorry." The finality in his voice sent a chill through her despite the heat. She stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "Then I suppose I have no choice." Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the jagged mountains to the west. Josie walked aimlessly, her mind racing for solutions where there seemed to be none. She didn't notice the man following her until his shadow fell across her path. "Miss Jones," Bartholomew Pierce called, his voice carrying across the street. "A word, if you please." Pierce stood beside his expensive carriage, dressed in a fine suit despite the heat. At 45, he maintained a commanding presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with a meticulously trimmed beard peppered with gray. If not for the coldness in his eyes, one might have called him handsome. Mr. Pierce, she acknowledged, stopping at a distance she hoped was respectful but not inviting. I trust my man delivered my message. Pierce smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Have you given thought to my proposal? You've given me until tomorrow, she reminded him. Indeed I have. He took a step closer. But I'm an impatient man, Miss Jones, and frankly, your situation isn't improving with time. My father's debts are not my responsibility, she said, summoning courage she didn't feel. Pierce laughed, the sound devoid of humor. In a perfect world, perhaps. But this is the frontier, my dear. A woman alone has few prospects. I'm offering you security, respectability. And what do you get in return? She challenged, his eyes hardened. A wife befitting my station, your father's land, and of course the pleasure of your company. He reached out to touch her face. Josie stepped back quickly. I have until tomorrow, Mr. Pierce. Sundown, he corrected. Don't disappoint me, Josephine. Your father's reputation, what remains of it, would not survive the scandal of his unpaid debts becoming public knowledge. With that, he tipped his hat and returned to his carriage, leaving Josie standing alone on the dusty street. She didn't notice Ethan O'Malley watching from the doorway of the general store, his jaw clenched tight as he observed the exchange. That evening, Josie sat alone on the porch of their once prosperous ranch house. The paint was peeling now, the fences in need of repair. Her father had not returned home, likely passed out at the saloon as had become his habit. She watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, wondering if this would be her last night of freedom. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her tense. She stood, peering into the growing darkness, relieved when she recognized Ethan O'Malley's dappled gray mare. Evening, Miss Jones, he called, dismounting with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life on horseback. Hope I'm not intruding. Mr. O'Malley, she greeted him, curious about his unexpected visit. What brings you out this way? He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. Thought you might need a friendly ear after what I saw in town today. Josie felt heat rise to her cheeks. You saw my conversation with Mr. Pierce, enough to know you're in a difficult position. He stepped onto the porch but maintained a respectful distance. Pierce has a reputation for getting what he wants by whatever means necessary. I'm well aware, she said, sinking back onto the porch swing. After a moment's hesitation, she gestured for him to join her. My father borrowed heavily from him to keep the ranch going after my mother died. When that wasn't enough, he turned to gambling, hoping for a miracle. Ethan sat beside her, his hat in his hands. Miracles are in short supply out here, so it seems. She looked at him curiously. Why are you really here, Mr. O'Malley? He met her gaze directly. I've got a proposition for you, Miss Jones, one that might solve your problem. She stiffened. I've had quite enough propositions, thank you. Not that kind, he said quickly, a flash of something like anger crossing his features. I need a housekeeper for my ranch. The pay would be fair and you'd have your own quarters. Most importantly, you'd be free of Pierce. Josie stared at him in surprise. You're offering me employment. I am, he confirmed. My sister was supposed to join me from Boston, but her husband's business is keeping them there longer than expected. The place needs a woman's touch, and I need help with the cooking and such. The offer was tempting painfully so, but Josie shook her head slowly. It wouldn't solve anything. Pierce would still hold the debts. He'd still take our ranch. Your father's debts, you mean, Ethan corrected gently. He's still my father, she sighed. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. O'Malley, but I don't see any way out of this situation. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the creaking of the swing and the night insects beginning their evening chorus. There might be another way, he finally said, his voice low, but it would require a great deal of trust on your part. What kind of way? She asked, unable to keep the desperation from her voice. I could pay off your father's debts, he said. Buy the mortgage from Pierce. Josie stared at him, speechless. Why would you do that for a stranger? Ethan's expression grew serious. I have my reasons for not wanting to see Pierce expand his holdings. And he hesitated. I find I can't stand by and watch him force a woman into marriage. That's very noble, she said cautiously, but I couldn't accept such charity. It wouldn't be charity. He stood, pacing the width of the porch. I'd expect to be repaid with interest. Your father has good land, just poorly managed. With the right hands working it, it could be profitable again. Hope flickered briefly before Josie extinguished it. Pierce won't sell. He wants the land too badly. And he wants. She couldn't finish the sentence. He wants you, Ethan said bluntly, which brings me to the second part of my proposition. Josie waited, her heart pounding. Marry me instead. The words hung in the night air between them. Josie stood abruptly. I don't understand. It would be a marriage of convenience, Ethan explained quickly. You'd have my name and protection. Pierce couldn't touch you or the land. Once your father's debts are settled, if you wish to dissolve the arrangement, I wouldn't stand in your way. You're suggesting we enter into a false marriage. The idea was scandalous, yet somehow less frightening than the prospect of becoming Pierce's wife. Not false, Ethan corrected. Legal in every sense, just with an understanding between us. Josie studied his face in the fading light. There was something he wasn't telling her, some deeper motivation behind his offer, yet his eyes held no malice, no calculation like Pierce's. Why would you do this? She asked again. Ethan hesitated. Let's just say I have personal reasons for wanting to thwart Bartholomew Pierce. And he added softly, I can't bear to see a woman forced into a life she doesn't choose. Josie took a deep breath. If I were to consider this madness, and I'm not saying I am, how would it work? Tomorrow, before Pierce's deadline, we'd go to town and announce our engagement, Ethan explained. I'd make it clear to Pierce that you're under my protection now. We'd be married by the preacher, all legal and proper. And after, she pressed, after you'd move to my ranch, we'd present ourselves as husband and wife to the town. Behind closed doors, you'd have your space and privacy. I'd sleep in separate quarters. The proposition was outrageous, improper, and yet, compared to life with Pierce, it seemed almost reasonable. Josie walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the land her family had worked for generations. I don't even know you, Mr. O'Malley. No, he agreed, moving to stand beside her. And I don't know you, but I'm offering you a choice, Miss Jones. That's more than Pierce is giving you. The truth of his words settled over her. A choice, even a desperate one, was more than she'd had this morning. I need time to think, she said finally. Ethan nodded, placing his hat back on his head. Dawn comes early. I'll return then for your answer. He stepped off the porch, then turned back. Whatever you decide, Miss Jones, know that the offer comes with no obligations beyond what I've stated. She watched him mount his horse and ride away, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the night. Inside the empty house, Josie moved through the rooms of her childhood, touching familiar objects, trying to imagine leaving them behind either as Pierce's unwilling bride or O'Malley's pretend wife. By the time the first light of dawn painted the eastern sky, Josie had made her decision. Ethan arrived as promised, his horse kicking up dust as he approached the ranch house. Josie was waiting on the porch, a small carpet bag at her feet. You've decided, he said, more statement than question as he dismounted. Yes, she stood straight, meeting his gaze. I accept your offer, Mr. O'Malley, on one condition. Name it. My father stays here on our land. No matter what happens between us or with Pierce, this remains his home. Ethan nodded. You have my word. I'll draw up the papers to make it legal. Relief washed over her. Then yes, I'll marry you. We should go now, Ethan said, glancing at the sun. Pierce won't waste time once he knows what we're planning. As they rode toward town, Josie on her own mare alongside Ethan, she finally asked the question that had kept her awake most of the night. Mr. O'Malley, what quarrel do you have with Bartholomew Pierce that would drive you to such lengths? Ethan's expression darkened. Pierce destroyed someone very dear to me once. I couldn't stop him then, but I can stop him now. Before she could press further, they crested the rise overlooking Silver Creek. The town was already bustling with morning activity, unaware of the drama about to unfold. Are you certain about this? Ethan asked, giving her one last chance to reconsider. Josie thought of Pierce's cold eyes, of her father's debts, of the limited options for a woman alone in the West. Then she looked at the man beside her, a virtual stranger offering a different kind of cage, but one with an eventual key. I'm certain, she said, and they rode into town together. They found Reverend Thompson at the small white church on the edge of town. The elderly preacher listened to their request with raised eyebrows. Marriage is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly, he cautioned. We understand the seriousness of our commitment. Ethan assured him. The Reverend looked to Josie. "Miss Jones, is this truly your wish?" "It is," she confirmed, praying her voice sounded more confident than she felt. "Very well. I can perform the ceremony this afternoon, after I've prepared the necessary documents." "Thank you, Reverend," Ethan said, guiding Josie back outside. Now comes the difficult part. Pierce's office was located above the bank he effectively controlled. As they climbed the stairs, Josie's heart hammered in her chest. Ethan placed a reassuring hand at the small of her back, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the clerk who announced their arrival. "Mr. O'Malley," Pierce greeted from behind his desk, his surprise at the visit quickly masked with a politician's smile. "And Miss Jones, what an unexpected pleasure." "Pierce," Ethan nodded curtly, "we've come to discuss Thomas Jones's debts." Pierce's eyes narrowed slightly. "I wasn't aware you had any interest in Jones's financial affairs, O'Malley." "I have an interest in his daughter," Ethan replied evenly, "and by extension, her family's welfare." Pierce's gaze flicked to Josie, a flash of anger crossing his features before his smooth mask returned. "Miss Jones and I have an understanding regarding those debts." "No longer," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "I'm prepared to buy the mortgage at fair market value plus 10% for your trouble. The mortgage is not for sale." Pierce stood, his palms flat on the desk. "Miss Jones and I have a private arrangement. An arrangement she's no longer interested in pursuing." Ethan stepped forward. "Josie has agreed to become my wife. The ceremony is this afternoon." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Pierce's expression darkened as he stared at Josie. "Is this true?" he demanded. "Yes," she managed, finding her voice. "Mr. O'Malley has asked for my hand and I've accepted." Pierce laughed, but the sound held no humor. "How convenient." "And what does your father think of this sudden engagement?" "Thomas Jones will be informed," Ethan said before Josie could respond. "But as Josie is of age, his approval isn't required." "I see." Pierce moved from behind his desk, circling them like a predator. "And you believe this changes our business arrangement?" "Your father still owes me a considerable sum, Miss Jones." "Which I'm prepared to pay," Ethan stated. "Name your price." Pierce stopped directly in front of Josie, ignoring Ethan completely. "You would throw yourself away on this stranger rather than accept my generous offer. A man you barely know over one of the most influential citizens in the territory." "I've made my choice," Josie said, meeting his gaze. Something dangerous flashed in Pierce's eyes. "You're making a grave mistake, my dear, one you'll come to regret. The only mistake would be allowing you to bully this woman into a marriage she doesn't want," Ethan said, stepping between them. "Now, are you willing to sell the mortgage, or shall I take this matter to the territorial judge?" Pierce stepped back, his composure returning like a mask sliding into place. "Take it to whoever you like, O'Malley. The law is on my side, the debt is legitimate, and I have no obligation to sell it to you or anyone else." "Then we have nothing further to discuss," Ethan said, taking Josie's arm. "Good day, Pierce." As they turned to leave, Pierce called after them. "This isn't over, O'Malley, not by a long shot." Outside, Josie released a shaky breath. "That went worse than I expected." "Actually, it went exactly as I expected," Ethan said grimly. "Pierce isn't a man who loses gracefully." "What do we do now?" "We get married, as planned. Then we deal with Pierce and the debt from a position of strength." He offered his arm. "Let's find your father. He should hear this from us before Pierce's men get to him." They found Thomas Jones where Josie had expected at the Silver Dollar, though the early hour meant he was still relatively sober. The shock on his face when they explained their plans was almost comical. "Married to O'Malley." He looked back and forth between them. "Josie, girl, what are you thinking? You barely know the man." "I know he's offering me a way out of marrying Pierce," she replied, "and a way to save our ranch." Thomas ran a hand over his face. "Pierce came to me with that marriage proposal after I lost big at his private game. I told him it was between him and you, that I wouldn't force you." He looked ashamed. "I'm sorry, Josie, I never thought he'd threaten you." "It doesn't matter now," she said, though the revelation that her father hadn't completely sold her out brought a measure of relief. "Mr. O'Malley and I will be married this afternoon." Thomas turned to Ethan. "And what do you get out of this arrangement, O'Malley?" Ethan met the older man's gaze steadily. I get the satisfaction of thwarting Pierce, for one, and I get a hard-working partner to help with my ranch. Partner. Thomas repeated skeptically. Yes, sir. Your daughter will be my wife in name and standing, with all the respect that entails. Thomas looked to Josie. And this is truly what you want, daughter. It's what I choose, she answered carefully. There's a difference. After a long moment, Thomas nodded. Then you have my blessing, for whatever that's worth these days. As they left the saloon, word of their impending marriage was already spreading through town like wildfire. Josie felt the weight of curious stares as they walked toward the general store. You'll need a proper dress, Ethan said. Something special for the occasion. That's not necessary, she protested. This is hardly a conventional wedding. All the more reason to maintain appearances, he insisted, guiding her into the store. The whole town will be watching. We need to be convincing. Mrs. Henderson, the shopkeeper's wife, nearly fell over herself in excitement when they explained their errand. A wedding? Today? How romantic! She ushered Josie toward the ready-made dresses at the back of the store. We don't have proper wedding gowns, of course, but this cream-colored cotton with the lace collar would be lovely. As Josie was fitted for the dress, which was indeed lovely, if simple, she caught sight of Pierce through the store window, watching from across the street. The cold determination in his expression sent a shiver down her spine. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, it seemed half the town had gathered at the little white church. News of a hasty wedding between the mysterious Ethan O'Malley and Thomas Jones's daughter was too juicy a piece of gossip to miss. Speculation ran rampant. Was she in a family way? Was it a love match? Or was it, as some whispered, a direct challenge to Bartholomew Pierce's known interest in the Jones girl? Josie stood in the small room at the back of the church, her hands twisting nervously in the folds of her new dress. Her father had cleaned up surprisingly well, even managing to borrow a decent suit for the occasion. You don't have to go through with this, he said quietly. We could leave, head for California, and abandon our home, our land. She shook her head. This is the best option, Pa. Maybe the only one. I've failed you, Josie. Your mother would be so disappointed in me. She'd want us to survive, Josie said, straightening his tie, and that's what we're doing. The church door opened and Sheriff Miller stuck his head in. Reverend's ready when you are, Miss Jones. Josie took a deep breath and nodded. We're ready. The small church was more crowded than she'd expected. Curious townspeople filled the pews, craning their necks to see the bride. At the altar stood Ethan, dressed in a clean black suit that transformed him from rugged rancher to handsome groom. For a brief, disorienting moment, Josie allowed herself to imagine this was real, that she was walking toward a man who had chosen her out of love rather than defiance. The ceremony itself was brief but proper. They exchanged simple gold bands that Ethan had somehow procured on short notice. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan hesitated only briefly before leaning down to place a chaste kiss on her lips, their first physical contact beyond the occasional guiding hand. The touch was warm, gentle, and over too quickly for Josie to process how it made her feel. As they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. O'Malley, Josie spotted Pierce standing at the back of the church. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he tipped his hat mockingly before turning to leave. He'll make trouble, she whispered to Ethan as they walked down the aisle. Let him try, Ethan replied, his hand firm at her waist. You're my wife now, he can't touch you. The word wife sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. For better or worse, she was now married to this near stranger who had swept into her life like a character from one of the dime novels she occasionally indulged in reading. A small reception followed at the town hotel, hastily arranged by some of the local women who couldn't resist the romance of an impromptu wedding. As Josie accepted congratulations from people she'd known her entire life, she marveled at how quickly her circumstances had changed. Yesterday, she'd been facing a forced marriage to a man she feared. Today, she was married to a man she barely knew but who had, thus far, treated her with nothing but respect. Are you ready to go home, Mrs. O'Malley? Ethan asked as the afternoon waned, offering his arm home. The word caught her off guard. I need to collect my things from the ranch first. Of course. He guided her outside where their horses waited. "Your father is welcome to join us for dinner this evening if you'd like." "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by the offer. "But I think it might be best to settle in first before we have guests." The ride to the Jones ranch was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Josie gathered her belongings quickly, taking only what would fit in 2 trunks clothes, a few books, her mother's silver hairbrush. The rest would remain here with her father. "I'll come check on you soon," she promised Thomas as they prepared to leave. "And you're welcome at the O'Malley Ranch anytime." Her father nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You be careful, Josie girl, Pierce isn't done with us yet." "Mr. Jones," Ethan said, extending his hand, "you have my word that I'll protect your daughter with my life if necessary." Thomas shook his hand firmly. "See that you do, O'Malley, see that you do." The O'Malley Ranch lay about 5 miles outside of Silver Creek, in the opposite direction from the Jones property. As they crested the final hill, Josie got her first proper look at what was now her home. The main house was larger than she'd expected. A sturdy 2-story structure with a wide front porch and multiple chimneys. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, bunkhouse, and what appeared to be a blacksmith shop. "It's not much compared to some," Ethan said, watching her reaction, "but it's solid and growing. It's beautiful," she said truthfully. After the declining state of her father's ranch, the well-maintained O'Malley property was impressive. A middle-aged Mexican woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Señor Ethan, you bring your bride, yes, Mrs. Ramirez," Ethan greeted warmly. "Yes, this is Josephine Josie, my wife." The woman beamed, coming forward to take Josie's hands in her own. "Bienvenida, Señora O'Malley. I am Rosa Ramirez. I cook and clean for your husband, now for you too." "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Ramirez," Josie said, relieved to discover there was another woman on the property. Come inside. I prepare special dinner for wedding night." Rosa bustled ahead, already chattering about the meal she had planned. Ethan helped Josie down from her horse. "Rosa and her husband, Miguel, have been with me since I bought this place. They live in the small house behind the orchard. Miguel handles the stable and general maintenance." "They seem kind," Josie observed as Ethan lifted her trunks down. "They are. You can trust them completely," he hesitated. "Rosa doesn't know the circumstances of our marriage. To her and everyone else, we are simply newlyweds." Josie nodded, understanding the necessity of the charade. "Of course." Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable. The furniture was solid if not fancy, and everything was scrupulously clean. Rosa had clearly been preparing for the new mistress of the house. Fresh flowers adorned the tables, and the delicious smell of roasting meat filled the air. "Let me show you upstairs," Ethan said, carrying her trunks. "You can freshen up before dinner." The upper floor contained 4 bedrooms. Ethan pushed open the door to the largest. "This is the master bedroom. It's yours now." Josie stepped inside, taken aback by the spacious room with its large bed, dresser, and sitting area near the window. "It's very nice, but where will you sleep?" "Across the hall," he replied, setting down her trunks. "I've been using the 2nd bedroom since I moved in. It's comfortable enough." Relief mingled with an odd disappointment that she chose not to examine too closely. "Thank you for everything." Ethan lingered in the doorway. "I meant what I said to your father, Josie. You're safe here. And when you're ready, we'll figure out how to deal with Pierce and the mortgage." After he left, Josie sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. 24 hours ago, she'd been contemplating a life of misery as Pierce's unwilling wife. Now she was married to a virtual stranger who seemed determined to protect her, yet wanted nothing from her in return. It seemed too good to be true, which meant it probably was. What wasn't Ethan O'Malley telling her? Dinner was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Rosa had outdone herself with a feast of roast beef, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Miguel joined them, a quiet man with kind eyes who spoke little but seemed genuinely pleased to welcome Josie to the ranch. "Tomorrow I show you the house properly," Rosa declared as she cleared the plates. "And the garden, many vegetables growing now." "I'd like that," Josie said, realizing she was eager to learn about her new home. "Perhaps you could also show me your routine so I can begin to help." Rosa looked horrified. No, no, senora, you are the mistress now, I do the work. I'm not used to being idle, Mrs. Ramirez, Josie explained. On my father's ranch, I did the cooking and cleaning, tended the garden, and even helped with the cattle when needed. Ethan looked impressed. You never mentioned you had experience with ranching. You never asked, she replied with a small smile. I've been working alongside my father since my mother died 10 years ago. A woman of many talents, he said, raising his coffee cup in a small salute. We're fortunate to have you here. The simple compliment warmed her more than it should have. After Rosa and Miguel retired to their cottage, Josie and Ethan sat awkwardly in the parlor, the reality of their unusual situation settling over them. I have some papers for you to sign, Ethan said finally, retrieving a folder from his desk. Legal documents confirming your status as my wife, with all rights to my property should anything happen to me. Josie frowned. That's hardly necessary. We both know this arrangement is temporary. Nevertheless, he placed the papers before her. I want everything to be proper and protected. Pierce will be looking for any weakness, any way to challenge our marriage. She scanned the documents, surprised by their thoroughness. You've thought of everything. I try to. He handed her a pen. There's also an agreement regarding your father's ranch. Once we settle the debt with Pierce, the property will remain in your family's name, with you as the legal owner rather than your father. You do that. She looked up in surprise. Why? Ethan's expression grew serious. Because Thomas Jones has proven he can't be trusted with his own legacy. But you can. The assessment of her father was harsh but fair. Josie signed the papers, feeling as though she was taking a step towards some new version of herself, one who made decisions and took control rather than simply reacting to circumstances. Thank you, she said, returning the pen. For giving me choices when I thought I had none. Ethan nodded, gathering the papers. It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow will be a busy day. As she climbed the stairs to her new bedroom, Josie couldn't help but wonder what twist of fate had brought Ethan O'Malley into her life at precisely the moment she needed him most, and what price she might eventually pay for his timely rescue. The first light of dawn was filtering through the curtains when Josie woke. For a moment, she was disoriented by the unfamiliar room before the events of the previous day came rushing back. She was married. This was her home now. The thought was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating. Dressing quickly in a simple blue work dress, she made her way downstairs, surprised to find the kitchen empty. Through the window, she could see activity in the barn and corral ranch hands already at work despite the early hour. The coffee pot was still warm on the stove, so she poured herself a cup and stepped onto the front porch. The morning air was cool and crisp, the sun just beginning to crest the distant mountains. From this vantage point, she could see most of the O'Malley property rolling pastures dotted with cattle, a small apple orchard, fields of what looked like wheat and corn in the distance. Good morning. She turned to find Ethan approaching from the barn, his shirt already showing signs of a morning's work. You're up early, she observed, offering him her coffee cup. He accepted with a grateful nod. Ranch work waits for no man or woman. He took a sip and handed the cup back. Did you sleep well? Better than I expected, she admitted. It's peaceful here. Most days, he agreed, though we've had some trouble lately. What kind of trouble? Ethan leaned against the porch railing. Cattle gone missing, fences cut, nothing I can prove but… You think it's Pierce, she finished for him. I know it is, but knowing and proving are different matters, he straightened. Have you eaten? Rosa usually doesn't start breakfast until 6. I'm not hungry yet, she said. I thought I might explore a bit, get to know the place. I'd be happy to show you around after breakfast, he offered. Unless you'd prefer to go alone. Company would be nice, she decided. Something about his direct gaze and quiet manner made her feel at ease, despite the strangeness of their situation. After a hearty breakfast with the ranch hands 6 men who treated her with a mixture of curiosity and respect, Ethan led her on a tour of the property. He was clearly proud of what he'd built in just 6 months, and with good reason. The O'Malley ranch was well organized and thoughtfully planned. You've accomplished a lot in a short time, she observed as they walked through the apple orchard. You must have had experience with ranching before. My family had a small place in Texas, he explained. Nothing like this, but enough to learn the basics. After the war, I worked on various ranches, saving up to buy my own someday. The war, she looked at him with new interest. You fought Confederate cavalry, he said, his expression shuddering slightly. Not something I'm particularly proud of now, but at 19, you do what your family and state expect. Josie nodded, understanding the complicated relationship many had with their wartime service, even 20 years later. And after I drifted for a while. Worked as a ranch hand, sometimes as a marshal when times were lean. He led her toward a small creek that bisected the property. Then I got word about the Henderson place being for sale, and it seemed like the right time to put down roots. Because of your sister. She asked, remembering his mention of family in Boston. Partly, he acknowledged. Rebecca's the only family I have left. I thought she might want to come west, start fresh after her husband's business failed. But they're staying in Boston instead. For now. Williams found new investors, apparently. His tone suggested he wasn't entirely pleased with this development. It's probably for the best. Life out here isn't easy, especially for a woman used to city comforts. Josie bristled slightly. Some women are stronger than men give them credit for, Mr. O'Malley. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and a slow smile spread across his face. I'm beginning to see that, Mrs. O'Malley. The use of her new name sent an unexpected thrill through her, Mrs. O'Malley. It would take some getting used to. They continued their tour, Ethan pointing out the boundaries of his property, the areas where he planned to expand, the challenges of water rights in the dry season. Josie listened attentively, asking questions that seemed to impress him with their practicality. You really do know ranching, he commented as they headed back toward the house. I told you I've been working alongside my father for years, she reminded him, until he lost his way after my mother died. What was he like before? Ethan asked. Your father, I mean. Josie thought for a moment. Strong, determined, fair with his men and generous with neighbors. Everyone respected Thomas Jones. She sighed. The drinking started slowly after Mother died, then the gambling. Each loss seemed to require a bigger bet to recover, and when that didn't work. He mortgaged the ranch to Pierce, Ethan finished. Yes, by the time I realized how bad things had gotten, it was too late. She looked across the rolling hills toward town. I sometimes wonder if Pierce targeted him deliberately, knowing the land would eventually be his. It wouldn't surprise me, Ethan said darkly. Pierce has been buying up every property he can get his hands on for the past 2 years. Some say he's planning to control the entire valley. Why? What could one man need with so much land? Power, Ethan said simply. Men like Pierce are never satisfied with what they have. They always want more. They had reached the house again, and Josie paused on the porch steps. Thank you for the tour. It's a beautiful property. It's your home now, he reminded her. Feel free to make any changes you think necessary. I'm not much for decorating. The idea that she had the freedom to put her stamp on this place, to truly make it a home, was both daunting and exciting. I'll keep that in mind. Over the next few days, Josie settled into a routine at the O'Malley Ranch. She rose early, helped Rosa with breakfast for the hands, then turned her attention to the house and garden. Ethan had been right, the place needed a woman's touch. Nothing had been updated since the previous owners, and while everything was functional, it lacked warmth and personality. Rosa proved to be a godsend, teaching Josie the rhythms of the ranch and introducing her to the Mexican cooking that the hands had grown accustomed to. Together, they tackled the house room by room, cleaning, organizing, and adding small touches that made the place feel more like a home than a way station. Ethan came and went throughout the day, checking on her progress, asking her opinion on ranch matters, treating her with a courtesy that gradually evolved into something like friendship. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch or in the parlor, talking about their day, making plans for improvements to the property, carefully avoiding any mention of the temporary nature of their arrangement. It was, Josie realized with some surprise, not an unpleasant way to live. There were moments when Ethan smiled at something she said, or when their hands accidentally touched reaching for the same item when she almost forgot the circumstances that had brought them together. A week after the wedding, Josie was in town with Rosa, purchasing supplies for the ranch and some fabric to make new curtains for the parlor. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, a familiar voice called her name. "Mrs. O'Malley, how domestic you look." Bartholomew Pierce stood nearby, impeccably dressed as always, watching her with cold amusement. "Mr. Pierce," she acknowledged with a nod, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden racing of her heart. "I trust married life is treating you well," he asked, approaching slowly. "Though I must say you don't have quite the glow one expects from a new bride." "I'm very happy, thank you," she replied stiffly. "Are you?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Or are you simply making the best of a desperate situation? I wonder what arrangement you and O'Malley have come to." "It must be interesting, given how quickly it all came about." Rosa moved protectively to Josie's side, glaring at Pierce. "We must go, Senora. Senor Ethan is expecting us." Pierce's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, don't keep your husband waiting. Though I imagine he's quite patient, all things considered." "Good day, Mr. Pierce," Josie said firmly, climbing onto the wagon seat. As Rosa flicked the reins and the wagon pulled away, Pierce called after them, "Give my regards to your father, Mrs. O'Malley. I've been meaning to pay him a visit." The threat was thinly veiled, and Josie felt a chill run through her. "We need to warn Pa," she said to Rosa. "Can we stop at the ranch on the way home?" "She, Senora," Rosa agreed, her expression grim. "This man is my malo very bad. Senor Ethan is right to be careful." They found Thomas Jones working in the barn, sober and clear-eyed for the first time in months. He seemed genuinely pleased to see Josie, proudly showing her the repairs he'd begun making to the neglected property. "It looks good, Pa," she said, touched by his efforts. "But I'm worried about you. I saw Pierce in town today. He made a point of saying he's planning to visit you." Thomas's expression hardened. "Let him come. I've got nothing left for him to take. Except your life," Josie said bluntly. "Pierce isn't a man who forgets a slight, and in his mind, my marriage to Ethan was a direct challenge to his authority." "I can handle Pierce," her father insisted, "like you handled your gambling debts." The words were out before she could stop them. Thomas flinched as if she'd struck him. "I deserve that, but I'm trying to make amends, Josie girl. I haven't touched a drop or a card since your wedding day." Josie softened. "I know, Pa, and I'm proud of you, but please be careful. Maybe you should come stay with us for a while." "On O'Malley's charity, no thank you." Her father's pride was wounded but intact. "This is my land, and I'll defend it if I have to." Knowing she couldn't change his mind, Josie gave him the supplies she'd purchased for him in town and extracted a promise that he would send word immediately if Pierce or any of his men showed up. As they drove back to the O'Malley ranch, Josie couldn't shake her sense of foreboding. Pierce wasn't a man who gave up easily, and he clearly had unfinished business with both her father and her new husband. Ethan was waiting when they returned, his expression darkening as Josie recounted her encounter with Pierce in town. "I knew he wouldn't back down," he said, pacing the length of the kitchen. "But threatening your father is a new low, even for him." "What are we going to do?" Josie asked. "Pa won't leave the ranch, and I can't bear the thought of Pierce hurting him to get to us." Ethan stopped pacing, his decision made. "It's time we settled this once and for all. Tomorrow, I'll go to the bank and pay off your father's debt." "But you said Pierce refused to sell the mortgage," Josie reminded him. "He did. But that was before. Now, I'll make him an offer he can't refuse, double the value of the mortgage in cash." Ethan's expression was determined. "Even Pierce won't turn down that kind of profit, especially if I make it clear it's a one-time offer. And if he still refuses, then we take it to the territorial judge, as I threatened before." Ethan took her hands in his, the first time he had initiated such contact since their wedding day. "I promise to protect you, Josie. That includes your father and your family's land." The sincerity in his eyes made her throat tight with emotion. "Why are you doing all this? The truth this time, please." Ethan released her hands and moved to the window, staring out at the gathering dusk. "Pierce destroyed my family once before," he said quietly. "I won't let him do it again." "Your family?" Josie moved to stand beside him. "I don't understand." Ethan was silent for a long moment. "My sister Rebecca wasn't the only family I had left," he finally said. "I had a brother too, David. Younger than me by 2 years." Josie waited, sensing the story wasn't a happy one. After the war, David and I drifted west together. We worked ranches in Texas, then New Mexico territory. 3 years ago, we ended up in Colorado, working for a man named James Sutton. Good man, fair boss. David fell in love with Sutton's daughter, Emma. They were planning to marry. What happened? Josie asked softly when he paused. Bartholomew Pierce happened. He wanted Sutton's land for the water rights. When Sutton refused to sell, Pierce started making trouble rustling cattle, threatening workers, the same tactics he's using here. Ethan's voice hardened. Then one night there was a fire in the bunkhouse. David was inside along with 3 other hands. None of them made it out. "Oh, Ethan," Josie breathed, instinctively placing a hand on his arm. "I'm so sorry." "It was never proven that Pierce was responsible," he continued, "but everyone knew. Sutton was broken after that. He sold to Pierce for a fraction of what the ranch was worth and moved east with what was left of his family. Emma died of pneumonia that winter. They said she just lost the will to live after David's death. And you've been planning your revenge ever since," Josie realized. "That's why you came to Silver Creek. You knew Pierce was here." Ethan turned to face her. "I came to stop him from destroying more lives. When I heard about your situation, how he was using your father's debts to force you into marriage, it was like history repeating itself." "So I'm part of your revenge," she said, withdrawing her hand. "No." He caught her hand before she could fully pull away. "You were never that, Josie. I wanted to help you because it was the right thing to do, because no woman should be forced into marriage, especially not to a man like Pierce." She searched his face, looking for any sign of deception, but found only earnest conviction. "And our marriage, was that just a convenient way to thwart him?" "At first," he admitted. "I thought it was the simplest solution, legal protection for you, and a clear message to Pierce that his tactics wouldn't work this time." "And now," the question slipped out before she could stop it. Ethan's expression softened. "Now, I find myself grateful for the circumstances that brought you into my life, regardless of how unconventional they were." The simple honesty of his statement touched something deep within her. Before she could respond, however, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention outside. 3 riders were coming up the lane at a gallop, one of them clearly injured and being supported by the others. As they drew closer, Josie recognized her father's foreman, Sam Tucker. "That's Sam," she said, already moving toward the door. "Something's happened." They rushed outside as the riders reached the house. Sam slid from his horse, his face bloody and one arm hanging at an odd angle. "Mrs. O'Malley," he gasped. "Thank God we found you. It's your Pa Pierce's men came to the ranch. They said they were collecting on the debt. Is he hurt?" Josie demanded, fear clutching at her heart. "Took a beating, but he's alive," Sam assured her. "They've got him at the ranch. Said O'Malley has until sunrise to bring the deed to both properties or your pa won't live to see another day." Ethan's expression hardened. "How many men?" 5, including Pierce himself," Sam replied. "They sent me as the messenger, but they're holding Rob and Jamie too." "Get inside," Ethan ordered, already moving toward the barn. "Miguel, saddle my horse and bring my rifle." "Ethan, wait," Josie caught up to him. "You can't just ride in there. They'll kill you." "I'm not giving Pierce either ranch," he said grimly, "and I'm not letting him hurt your father." "Then we need a plan," she insisted. "And help." Ethan paused, considering her words. "You're right. Pierce is expecting me to come charging in. We need to be smarter than that." Within the hour, a strategy had been formed. Miguel rode to town to alert Sheriff Miller, while Rosa tended to Sam's injuries. Ethan gathered his ranch hands, arming them with rifles and pistols from his gun cabinet. "I don't like you coming along," Ethan told Josie as she prepared to mount her horse. "He's my father," she said firmly, "and I know that ranch better than anyone. Besides, Pierce might hesitate if I'm there, or he might use you as leverage," Ethan countered. "He already has leveraged my father." She checked the small pistol Ethan had given her, making sure it was loaded. "I'm coming, Ethan, either with you or behind you." Recognizing the determination in her eyes, Ethan nodded. "Stay close to me. If things go wrong, you ride for the sheriff. Understood?" "Understood," she agreed, though they both knew she had no intention of leaving her father or Ethan behind. The moon was high as they approached the Jones ranch, illuminating the familiar buildings in silver light. They had left the horses half a mile back, approaching on foot through the wooded area that bordered the property. From their vantage point, they could see two of Pierce's men on the porch, rifles across their laps. Light glowed from the windows of the main house. "Your father's probably inside," Ethan whispered. The barn and bunkhouse looked dark. Josie nodded, her heart pounding. "What's the plan? Williams and Johnson will circle around to the back of the house. Rodriguez and Davis will take positions near the corral to prevent anyone from escaping on horseback. You and I will approach from the front, under the pretense of negotiating. And then we see what Pierce wants," Ethan said grimly, "besides the obvious." They waited until the ranch hands were in position before making their move. Walking openly down the lane toward the house, they were spotted immediately by the men on the porch. "That's far enough, O'Malley," one of them called, raising his rifle. "I'm here to speak with Pierce," Ethan replied calmly, his hands visible at his sides. "About Thomas Jones." The door opened, and Pierce himself stepped onto the porch, looking completely at ease in his tailored suit despite the late hour and violent circumstances. "Mrs. O'Malley," he greeted, as if they were meeting at a social gathering. "How thoughtful of you to join us, and your husband." The way he said the word made it clear he considered their marriage a sham. "Where's my father?" Josie demanded. "Quite safe, I assure you, for now." Pierce gestured toward the door. "Please, come inside, we have much to discuss." Ethan placed a protective hand at Josie's back as they climbed the porch steps. Inside, they found Thomas Jones tied to a chair in the parlor, his face bruised and bloody but his eyes alert. "Josie," he croaked. "You shouldn't have come. Did you bring the deeds?" Pierce asked, closing the door behind them. "No," Ethan said flatly. "I brought an offer instead, double the value of Jones's mortgage in cash. You walk away with a tidy profit and we never have to see each other again." Pierce laughed. "Your negotiating position seems rather weak, O'Malley, considering I have 3 hostages and 5 armed men at my disposal." "4, Ethan corrected. "Your man at the corral won't be joining us, and Sheriff Miller is on his way with a posse." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Pierce's face before his confident mask returned. "Even if that's true, they won't arrive in time to prevent me from putting a bullet in Thomas Jones's head if I don't get what I want." "And what is it you really want, Pierce?" Ethan asked, taking a calculated step toward him. "The land, or is it the satisfaction of destroying another family?" Pierce's eyes narrowed. "I'm a businessman, O'Malley, nothing more, a businessman who burns bunkhouses with men inside." Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "Who forces women into marriage to get their land?" Understanding dawned in Pierce's expression. "Ah, now I see. This is about Colorado, about your brother." He smiled coldly. "David, wasn't it such a tragedy?" Josie saw Ethan's hands clench into fists and feared he would lunge at Pierce, ruining their plan. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "My father needs a doctor," she said, deliberately changing the subject. "Let me tend to him while you two discuss business." Pierce waved a dismissive hand. "By all means." As Josie moved to her father's side, Ethan kept Pierce engaged. "You won't get away with this, you know. Even if you kill us all, questions will be asked. The territorial governor doesn't look kindly on land barons who murder their way to power." "Murder is such an ugly word," Pierce replied, pouring himself a drink from Thomas's whiskey decanter. "Accidents happen all the time on the frontier. A house fire, a runaway horse, a stray bullet during a robbery gone wrong. Who's to say what really happened?" Outside, a sudden commotion erupted, shouts, then gunfire. Pierce moved to the window, momentarily distracted. It was the opening Ethan had been waiting for. With lightning speed, he drew his pistol and brought it down hard on the back of Pierce's head. The cattle baron crumpled to the floor, unconscious. "Cut your father loose," Ethan ordered, already moving toward the door. "We need to help the others." The fight outside was brief but intense. 2 of Pierce's men surrendered quickly when faced with Ethan's hands and the sheriff's approaching posse. A third tried to escape on horseback, but was caught by Rodriguez and Davis. The fourth, the one who had been guarding the porch with his companion, was found unconscious behind the barn courtesy of Williams's rifle butt by the time Sheriff Miller arrived with his deputies. Pierce and his men were securely tied and under guard in the barn. Quite a situation you've got here, O'Malley, the sheriff observed, surveying the scene. Pierce is claiming you ambushed him during a legitimate business meeting about Jones's mortgage. He had Thomas Jones tied up and beaten, Ethan pointed out, and threatened to kill him if I didn't sign over both our ranches. Not to mention he sent his men to attack my father's foreman when he tried to get help, Josie added, her arm around her father, who was now seated on the porch, his wounds bandaged. Sheriff Miller sighed. Pierce has powerful friends in the territorial capital. It's going to be his word against yours. Not quite, Thomas Jones spoke up, his voice rough but determined. I've been keeping a record of Pierce's threats and underhanded tactics for months now. Started as a way to clear my conscience, I suppose. Every loan, every rigged poker game, every threat. It's all written down with dates and witnesses where I had them. Josie stared at her father in surprise. You never said anything. I was ashamed, Josie girl, ashamed of how far I'd fallen. Thomas met her gaze steadily, but when Pierce's men came tonight, I knew it was time to stop hiding from my mistakes. Where is this record? The sheriff asked, hidden under a floorboard in my bedroom, second plank from the wall beneath the rug. Thomas looked at Ethan. It won't prove everything, but it should be enough to warrant an investigation, especially if others come forward once Pierce is behind bars. As dawn broke over the ranch, Pierce and his men were loaded into the sheriff's wagon for the journey back to town. Pierce, now conscious but sporting a sizable lump on his head, fixed Ethan with a venomous glare. This isn't over, O'Malley, he hissed. Not by a long shot. Yes, it is, Ethan replied calmly. Your days of terrorizing this community are done. As the wagon pulled away, Josie turned to her husband, for she had begun to think of him that way in truth, not just in name. What happens now? Ethan looked down at her, the rising sun illuminating his face. Now we rebuild, both ranches, together if you're willing. There was a question in his eyes that went beyond business arrangements or convenient partnerships. Josie found herself wanting to answer it, but not here, not now, with so many people around. Let's get Pa home first, she said. Then we can talk about the future. 3 days later, word came from town that Bartholomew Pierce had been formally charged with multiple counts of extortion, assault, and attempted murder. Several other ranchers had come forward with similar stories of threats and intimidation once they knew Pierce was in custody. The territorial judge had denied bail, citing the risk of flight and the serious nature of the charges. Thomas Jones was recovering well, his physical wounds healing faster than the emotional ones. He had sworn off gambling and drinking, this time with a conviction that gave Josie hope it might last. The revelation of his secret records had earned him a measure of respect from neighbors who had previously written him off. Ethan had been true to his word, paying off the mortgage on the Jones ranch with a bank in the neighboring town, ensuring Pierce could never again use it as leverage. Thomas had signed the deed over to Josie, as Ethan had suggested, but with the understanding that it would remain her father's home for as long as he lived. As for Josie and Ethan, they had settled into a routine at the O'Malley Ranch, working side by side to manage both properties. The awkwardness of their arranged marriage had given way to a comfortable partnership based on mutual respect and growing affection, yet neither had addressed the fundamental question that hung between them: what happened next? Their marriage had been one of convenience, a solution to an immediate problem. With Pierce no longer a threat, the original reason for their union no longer existed. It was Josie who finally broached the subject one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. I've been thinking, she began, her hands nervously smoothing her skirt, about our arrangement. Ethan turned to look at her, his expression carefully neutral. Oh, you said when we married that once my father's debts were settled, if I wished to dissolve our arrangement, you wouldn't stand in my way. She met his gaze. Do you still feel that way? A shadow crossed his face. I'm a man of my word, Josie. If that's what you want, I'll honor our agreement. That's not what I asked, she said softly. I asked how you feel. Ethan was silent for a long moment, looking out across the land they had worked together. I feel, he finally said, that what began as convenience has become something else entirely, at least for me. Josie's heart quickened. What has it become? He turned to face her fully, his eyes reflecting the last golden light of day. I find myself hoping each morning that you'll still be here when I wake up, planning improvements to the ranch with you in mind, wondering what it would be like if our marriage were real in every sense, not just on paper. It sounds to me, she said carefully, as if you're describing love, Mr. O'Malley. I believe I am, Mrs. O'Malley. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but sure. I never expected to find it this way, but there it is. Josie twined her fingers with his. When you stepped forward that day in town, saying I was yours, I thought you were just being noble, saving a stranger from a terrible fate. Perhaps I was at first, he acknowledged, but you've never been just a stranger to me, Josie. From that first moment, there was something about you, your courage, your determination that called to me. Even though our marriage began as a convenient solution to a problem, she said, moving closer to him, I've come to care for you, Ethan. More than I thought possible in such a short time. Are you saying you might consider making our temporary arrangement permanent? There was hope in his voice, but also caution, as if he feared pressing too hard might shatter this fragile moment between them. I'm saying, Josie replied, gathering her courage, that I'd like us to begin again. Not as two strangers entering a business arrangement, but as a man and woman who care for each other and want to build a life together. Ethan's smile was like the sunrise, slow, warm, and full of promise. I'd like that very much. He leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was nothing like the brief, chaste one they had shared at their wedding. This was a beginning, not an obligation, tender and questioning at first, then deepening as Josie responded with equal fervor. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I should probably court you properly, he murmured. Bring you flowers, take you to dinner in town. Josie laughed softly. We've done everything backward, haven't we? Marriage first, courtship after. We could renew our vows, he suggested. Make new promises based on what we feel now, not what was necessary then. I'd like that, she agreed. Something small with just family and close friends. And a proper honeymoon this time, Ethan added, his eyes twinkling. Perhaps Denver or San Francisco. The thought of traveling with Ethan, of exploring new places together as true partners, filled Josie with excitement. That sounds wonderful. As darkness fell around them, they remained on the porch, planning their future together not as a convenient solution to a problem, but as two people who had found love in the most unexpected of circumstances. 5 years later, the O'Malley Ranch had nearly doubled in size, incorporating the original Jones property and additional land purchased from neighbors willing to sell. The main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, 3-year-old Thomas, named for Josie's father, and 1-year-old Rebecca, named for Ethan's sister who had finally visited from Boston the previous summer. Thomas Jones had remained on his original homestead, now sober for 5 years, and serving as a respected elder statesman among the ranchers of Silver Creek. He doted on his grandchildren and had become a true father to Ethan, healing old wounds for both men. Bartholomew Pierce had been convicted and sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. His empire had been dismantled, his properties sold to pay restitution to those he had wronged. The shadow he had cast over the community had lifted, allowing prosperity and peace to flourish. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Ethan and Josie stood on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard under Rosa's watchful eye. Miguel was teaching young Thomas how to ride his pony, while Rebecca toddled after them, determined not to be left behind. Did you ever imagine this? Josie asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. That day in town when you claimed me as yours, did you ever think we'd end up here? Ethan's arm tightened around her waist. I hoped, he admitted. Even then, there was something about you that made me think of forever. Even though you only married me to thwart Pierce and avenge your brother, she teased gently. I married you because you needed rescuing, he corrected. I stayed married to you because I fell in love. Josie turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. Best decision I ever made, accepting your proposal. Best hat trick I ever pulled, he countered with a grin, referring to the moment he had tipped his hat in town and declared her his. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors as that evening 5 years ago when they had decided to make their marriage real, Ethan and Josie O'Malley sealed their anniversary with a kiss that held all the passion, tenderness, and love that had grown between them, a love born of necessity but nurtured by choice, day after day, year after year, in the wild and beautiful land they now called home.